Seeing none, I will entertain a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Second.
Mr. Bongiovanni?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Mrs. Crock?
Judy?
Judy?
We'll skip her. Mr. Ray?
Yes.
Mr. Toppin?
Yes.
Okay. Mayor Francis?
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert?
Yes. We had an executive session meeting on October 5th, 2021. We put off until this meeting approving the minutes of that meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the meeting in executive session of October 5th, 2021? Then I will entertain a motion for approval. That motion has to be made by somebody who did read the minutes and signed the document saying that you read them.
I'll move it.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Danielle, do you have the list of the people who signed?
Yep, safely on my desk at work.
Good. Okay, call the roll, and the people who didn't sign it will just abstain.
Just abstain. Mr. Bongiovanni?
Abstain.
Mr. Duncan?
Abstain.
Mrs. Crock? She's still muted.
No, she's
No,
not muted.
Mr. Ray?
Yes.
Mr. Toppin?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Councilman Schindler?
Abstain.
Mayor Francis?
Yeah.
Mr. Gilbert?
Yes. Okay. We have no continued applications, so we will move right to the new applications. IAT Reinsurance, Block 50002, Lot 7, 270 Stanhope Sparta Road. Applicant is proposing to move the location of a previously approved pro shop, and there are some variances. Is there somebody here representing IAT tonight?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, William Askin on behalf of the applicant, IAT Reinsurance.
Okay, is there will you have anybody else testify, Mr. Askin?
I do. I have our expert planner and engineer, Mr. John Hanson, is with us this evening, and I also have from the Hudson Farm facility, I have Mr. John Wunderlich, who's the manager of operations.
Okay, would Mr. Hanson and Mr. Wunderlich please unmute yourselves and raise your right hand so you can be sworn in?
You swear the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And Mr. Hanson, you've testified before this board in the past as a licensed New Jersey engineer and planner, isn't that?
Yes, I've testified a number of times as a licensed engineer and a licensed planner before this board. My licenses are both in good standing.
We should just have one volume.
Okay.
Hanson,
I don't think we have any objection to accepting him as an expert witness.
Thank you.
And Bill, do you have any questions for Mr. Wunderlich?
No. Mr. Wunderlich, what's your position with the applicant?
I'm one of the managers here on the property.
You're the manager
Of the
on
property. Yes, representing IT.
Okay, would everybody who's not speaking please mute themselves so that we don't have any feedback? And Mr. Askin, go right ahead.
Mr. Wunderlich, also, you don't have a phone on that's got the same system, do you? You got a lot of feedback when you talk. So that might be coming through another device there too.
You can just.
I'm just gonna turn mine off and sit next to one of the other guys.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Hanson.
Yes, hi.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, William Askin on behalf of the applicant. You want to turn are you muted?
Mr. Eskin, okay.
Yeah. So this is our application for an amended site plan that was approved by this board. Actually, we filed our previous application back in 2019. There were hearings in December of 2019 and again in January of 2020 when the application was approved by this board. It is for a proposed development of a pro shop on the property and a conversion from what had been a mixed-use 13-bedroom residential structure, and required 3 variances at the time. The same 3 variances are at the heart of the application tonight, as well as the slight amendment to the approved plan. Those variances that were approved in the prior application were for the expansion of a pre-existing non-conforming use, and then 2 C variances for floor area, maximum floor area, and maximum height. In addition to looking, obviously, for the board's consideration on the variances required for this amendment, we also would need to have the D2 variance for the expansion of the pre-existing non-conforming use reapproved or considered for approval by the board again this evening.
Okay.
Mr. Hanson will detail
continue,
the particulars of the amended application. It resulted from just a slight shifting in the actual location of the structure itself. And then Mr. Wunderlich will talk to the board about the reasons behind their kind of a site adjustment to the development of the property and answer any questions that the board might have.
Okay, before you go any further,
I'll let
Mr. Askin,
Mr. Hanson take over and walk you through the
I've
site
got to
plan.
ask that the mayor and councilman recuse themselves since this is a D variance.
That's fine. I recuse myself.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor?
You're
You're
muted,
muted,
Mike. Michael, you're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. I love technology. I just have to be recused a couple of times.
Okay. Then we can go back to Mr. Askin.
All right, I'll turn it over to Mr. Hanson now. I think he's been sworn in and
Yes. Okay, Mr. Hanson. Mr. Hanson is sharing his screen. Okay. Are you muted, Mr.? Is Mr. Hanson muted? I don't hear any.
How about that? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thank
Be
you.
one of those nights, Al.
Oh, that's okay.
We'll get through it. So what you have here in front of you is sheet 3 of 4. It's titled Pro Shop Site Plan. It's prepared by Ferrero Engineering, Chester, New Jersey. And this was the previously approved plan, or previous plan that you folks had approved back in 2020. And so what you see here in the center of this page, I'm going to zoom this in a little bit. This is the footprint of the existing quail building that was proposed to remove the carport and then have an addition on the back side of it. The addition is the shaded area, and the existing building was what you see here in white. And that total box was approximately 65 by 112. And what you approved was a total square footage of building floor area of 10,198 square feet. There was also some patios, which you see on the front of the building, which is in this area here where my cursor is. So that's what the board approved. And what's good to understand about that is that the building itself, the existing building, was on a slab. And so when they looked at this, there was really just two stories of area from the new addition and 1 story of floor area here. And there was some loss of storage area, or floor area, I should say, because the building addition had to be constructed around the existing footing. So if the board needs some additional testimony from Mr. Wonderly, he can tell you the complications that they looked at as they started to really look at how this building would function and whether or not they needed to really rip the building down and do a new building. So they did conclude that that was what was necessary, and I'm going to stop sharing this and I'll share the new plan here with you. And so what you see here, this is the plan that was filed with the subject application. It's prepared by my firm, Engineering and Land Planning Associates. And this is sheet 3 of 4, titled Pro Shop Construction Plan, dated April 14th, 2021. And as you look in here, you'll see behind the shaded area, the old Pro Shop structure. And in shaded area, the box of 75 by 125 is what they're proposing to do for the new Pro Shop. So it's essentially over the same building. It's shifted slightly away from the road, which is a good thing. There's still about over 1,000 square feet from the county road. But you'll see here that this building is proposed to have 2 areas of area. One will be the basement, and then the floor above it. It'll be built into the hill like the original Pro Shop was. So as you're walking into the building from the front or the covered porch area, it'll just be a single story structure is what it'll look like. And then within the space between the roof area and the top of the first floor area, there'll be some storage area in there. So the design was just a better design. It fit the needs of the Hudson Farm better and really is just a better, cleaner construction. It's important to note that the materials and the look of the building will essentially be the same as the board had approved before. It will, of course, be a tasteful looking structure like all of the other structures here at Hudson Farm. The actual usage of the structure from the interior components will have the same uses that were before. The difference in square footage, which is an increase, is really attributed to additional storage areas. So the total square footage of the new proposed Pro Shop will be a total of 21,817 square feet in floor area. And then there's an increase in impervious coverage from the previously approved plan of 3,670 square feet. But again, the septic that was designed will accommodate this. It's built or to be built essentially upon the same footprint of what you see out there now. So is there any questions before I just go into some brief variance testimony?
Does any member of the board have questions about that? I guess not. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So the board had granted a number of variances last time. The first is a D variance. This is called a D2 variance because the club use on this property is an existing non-conforming use. And so by approving this project would technically be an expansion of a non-conforming use. So we do need that D variance. That was approved by the board last time. But in reality, although it's called an expansion of a non-conforming use, it's really not an expansion of the intensity of this structure. The structure will not, require any additional parking or any additional sewage flow or any additional water. It is really, the addition is for additional storage and a better use of that space. So the other variances that are required your ordinance requires that accessory structures with respect to ordinance number 242-15B as in boy 2, no accessory building shall have a floor or ground area in excess of 1/2 of the floor or ground area, whichever is smaller, of the principal building on the same lot. This variance was granted last time, and again, we're requesting this variance, and this is because the principal structure has been considered to be the main house or the clubhouse, and so that actually has a smaller square footage than the pro shop, so that variance is requested. That's a C variance. The next variance is from 242-15B as in boy 3, which is the total floor area or ground area of all accessory buildings, if more than one, shall not exceed 1/2 the floor or ground area, whichever is smaller of the principal building on the same lot. So that's, again, another variance that we need, another variance that was granted before by this board. So we're requesting that again. Also need, lastly, the last C variance would be from ordinance, it's 242-15B as in boy 4, which says, except as permitted in a Hopatcong Borough Code 242-24, no accessory building or structure shall exceed 18 feet in height or the height of the principal structure, whichever is less, except for freestanding flagpoles, which shall not exceed the height of the principal building or 20 feet, whichever is greater. So the height of the pro shop was previously granted at 40 feet. This pro shop would actually be would calculate to a height of 34 feet as measured from the ridge to the average grade as calculated from 6 feet from the face of the building. So there's a slight reduction in building height here, which is positive, and it does exceed the 18 feet that's required, or the maximum that's required by your ordinance, so variance relief is required. So just to go quickly through the D variance relief, the D variance, there's a positive and negative criteria. I know the board's heard this many times, but just briefly to go through it. The positive criteria is met if special reasons exist, and if those special reasons are consistent with the purposes of the municipal land use law. And then the negative criteria is met if the board finds and the applicant proves that there's no substantial detriment to the zone plan or the zoning ordinance or the public good. And then for the C variances, in this case, these are C2 variances, which testified to last time, and C2 variances are flexible C variances. So it's not really due to the hardship of the property, it's really due to the aesthetics and whether this meets some purposes of the municipal land use law. And so I think there's a couple here. These are consistent with the prior testimony back in 2020. Purpose A really is to promotion of the general welfare. And this is what clearly amplifies the meaning of special reasons for the courts. And basically this is would promote safety and a controlled environment for the gun storage and for this use to be performed on this property. So expanding it and having it in a controlled and organized manner is really promoting a purpose A. And then purpose G is to provide sufficient space and appropriate locations for a variety of uses according to their respective environmental requirements in order to meet the needs of all New Jersey citizens. And really the location of this building and in this space on this property is appropriate and will provide a limited necessary service for a group of citizens in New Jersey. So I think clearly the D variance is met from the positive criteria standpoint there. From the negative criteria standpoint, there's really no detrimental impacts here, certainly nothing that rises to the point of a substantial detriment. There's no advertising here. You can't see the building from the street. It'll be approximately 1,000 feet plus from the street. We're promoting to keep, the same general layout of the campus on the property. It'll be a good-looking building, and all the good things that the Hudson Farm does, the conservation, the promotion of the community, and the gun safety and so forth, will all continue. So there's no substantial detriment there from the zone plan, the zoning ordinance, or the public good, in my opinion. And then finally, from a master plan standpoint, this property has long established a green belt. There's over 3,800 continuous acreage with all the properties together that this is part of. It protects natural features and resources, and it really helps promote the development of trail systems and connecting open space throughout the multiple communities as a property in general. So why don't I stop there and see if there's any questions from the board?
Hey, Mr. Rushke, you had presented us with a report previously, and there were at least 7 items in that report. Do you have any comment about what he said?
But John, are you going to address the stormwater and discuss how you're going to address that in the near future?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for bringing that up, John. Yeah, we do. We fully intend to design a stormwater system and have, obviously subject to Mr. Rushke's approval. It'll meet the requirements that we need to for a major development. We've consulted Mr. Rushke about this, and we have a game plan and a conceptual stormwater management plan so far. We've done some test holes to prove that these locations work. And as a condition of any approval, we would certainly be designing that system to John's approval.
Okay, so are you, so you're proposing to do that, present those stormwater as a conditional approval? Because some of them, you're going to be building a new detention basin. You feel that that's something that does not have to go back to the board?
Well, what we'd like to do is, the stormwater management plan will be a comprehensive plan for the campus. And so what we'd like to do is have a condition that meets with your satisfaction as to the stormwater management that you'd like to have done prior to a CO of this building. So, this building will
Okay.
take.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I do appreciate that condition because I think it's important. I appreciate your need to move forward with this approval in order to advance the building. But the stormwater component is critical from our perspective for, making sure that we comply with our stormwater regulations and such. So, having that tied that at least you'll come back prior to a CO for that approval. I think the board should see that application only because it does, you are proposing in that concept plan a detention basin that's, located in close proximity to the county road, and it is changing grades on site. So it is something I feel a little uncomfortable just making that completely a condition of approval. I think I would want to see the board, even if it's just a formality, have the board review those site improvements just so that they can see it.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Is that it, Mr. Rushke?
That's all. That's the only thing.
Okay. Do any of the other board members have questions at this point? Questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Hanson, you can continue.
I really don't have anything else. That's really the heart of my direct testimony. I think the application is worthy of approval. I think it meets the positive and the negative criteria outlined in the ordinance, and it's really very substantially similar to what you've already approved in the past.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions from the board?
I think it's pretty much in line with what they did, very similar to it. We're just modifying it slightly to make this.
Okay. Okay, why don't I open it up to the public? Would anybody from the public like to comment or question this application at all? On this application only? Anybody at all from the public? If so, please go to the bottom of your screen and in reactions, raise your hand. I'll wait for a moment while Mr. Tappan and I scan the screen.
Oh, I don't see any, Alan.
Okay, I don't see any either. Then I will bring it back to the board. What is the pleasure of the board?
Make a motion with the stipulations John just stated.
Okay, is there a second?
Second it.
Okay, it's been seconded. Who seconded that?
Anthony.
Anthony, okay.
Mr. Bongiovanni,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Mrs. Crock,
Yes.
Oh, she's there. Mr. Ray?
Yeah. I'm here.
Mr. Ray?
Bob, you're muted.
You're still muted, Bob.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Toppin?
Yes.
Danielle,
Yeah.
Phil Riley's here.
Okay, Mr. Riley?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert?
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. You have
Just
our approval.
one
Mr. Askin?
request.
Yeah. Mr. Askin, you understand that your
Chairman?
app will have to come back to the board prior to the issuance of a CO in regard to the stormwater review.
Mr. Askin?
Yes, just a quick request if Mr. Haggerty, if the board would consider waiving the formal adoption of the resolution.
Okay. All right. He wants a waiver of memorialization. Before we get to that, Mr. Haggerty, you want to reiterate what you asked Mr. Askin?
Mr. Askin, you do understand that the applicant will have to reach the board prior to the issuance of a CO so that the stormwater measures can be reviewed and discussed in a public meeting. So at some point, a plan will be presented to the board.
You understand that, Mr. Askin?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay. Then Mr. Askin has requested a waiver of memorialization. Would somebody from the board like to make that motion?
Make a motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second it.
Hey, Ray?
Mr. Bongiovanni?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Mrs. Crock?
Yes.
Mr. Ray?
Yes.
Mr. Toppin?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Riley?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert?
Yes. Okay, you have the waiver of memorialization. Thank you very much for attending tonight.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate
And
your
thank you
time.
for your testimony. Okay, we have another new application. Castle Black LLC, Block 70218, Lot 39, 225 Lakeside Avenue. The applicant would like to rehabilitate, reconstruct the dwelling with the same footprint and location on the property. And there are some variances and other things going on. Is there somebody here representing Castle Black?
No,
You're
just one
muted, I
thing.
believe. Mr. Kelly, you're muted.
Alan, I think the mayor and Mr. Schindler can rejoin the meeting now, right?
Yeah, they can come back in.
Okay.
I'm here. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Kelly, you are still muted. There you go.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so that is Kevin Kelly Esquire from Kelly and Ward. And who else is going to be testifying tonight? Anyone?
Your Honor, on behalf of Black Castle, Sherry Borg, who is the principal of the LLC, and Paul Masson also would be testifying tonight. I think they're on the line.
Okay, if Sherry, if you would unmute and both of you raise your right hand and Mr. Haggerty will swear you in.
You swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Sherry, state your full name, please.
Sherry Borg,
Spell your last name.
B-O-R-G.
All right. And sir, please, your full name?
Paul Masser, M-A-S-S-E-R.
Okay. It was indicated that Sherry is a principal of the LLC. And how about your position?
I'm her husband.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Kelly, it's up to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a is a straightforward application factually. The law, because it's about the law of nonconforming uses, gets a little blurry. So let me just start with how we got here. Our clients bought, or Black Castle bought this property, 225 Lakeside Avenue, back in 2018. In earlier this year, they applied and received a zoning permit to do this renovation that nobody really, renovations are what they are. You do find out a lot as you go along. And so they did get building and construction permits back in August. And unfortunately, in September 22, they were issued a stop work order. I don't have to tell everybody this is November 1st. So I'm sure you all know what that, and you know what that means. So we filed this application on as soon as possible on October 7th of this year. We were trying to get on the October 19 meeting. We're on for tonight, and we're glad to be on for tonight. It's important to remember here that we're dealing with a non-conforming structure, and we have I did submit a legal memorandum with all the documents that I just mentioned as exhibits, and I'm going to use those tonight. But we are dealing here with a non-conforming structure as opposed to a non-conforming use. We're not expanding any use, nor are we expanding the structure. It's on the same exact footprint, and there is no change to that. So leaving a lot of options aside, we just wanted to apply for whatever approvals you all think is necessary so this project can be saved, really. That's what this is about. We don't think that even though there's supposedly 3 variances, all of those are existing conditions. And we've argued, and I just want to mention it for the record because I don't understand it right now. We have attached as our exhibit, E, ordinance 242-63. It begins with non-conforming uses and structures, and then it says restoration, and it has a subsection B. Again, exhibit E that I hope you all have. And it says, restoration of existing buildings or structures non-conforming for reasons other than use. And it says, wherever that kind of building is non-conforming because it fails to comply with any height, area, yard, off-street parking, or other like requirement of this chapter other than use, again, and such building is partially destroyed, such building may be restored to its prior condition, provided that such restoration shall not enlarge the previous existing nonconformance. And what I think that says that we don't need anything, but nonetheless, we're following as an alternative the C variance relief that was set forth actually on your notice tonight and on our notice. And while I prefer that you would agree with the first position, if you want, we certainly have very, very compelling C1 and C2 variance requests. But please remember, those things were there. We're not increasing any of that. And I think that maybe, these non-conforming use cases get off on some twists and turns. And there was a notion that the zoning officer wanted to limit the the renovations to 51%. Well, nobody knows that number, exactly what it is. It's assumed more or less, maybe that it was around that number, but nobody really knows. And we're not going to testify about that tonight either, because it doesn't really matter. The law in New Jersey, in addition to what I just told you, I just quoted from your ordinance, doesn't use a number and actually has rejected, and you can see that at page 4 of my brief, has rejected numbers like 69% and 75% in appellate division cases. Other than that, the court doesn't tell us a lot about partial destruction. So this is a call for you to make. We hope, we want to comply with all the rules. We hope that we're doing that. And we need this, again, we just need to be able to finish this project before all sorts of bad weather occurs. And that's really our case. And if there aren't any questions after that, I'd like to call Ms. Sherry, well, I'd like to call Mr. Masser and Ms. Borg.
This is a difficult area of the law because it talks about partial destruction and it doesn't define partial destruction in the statute, and case law is confusing at best that reviews these. But the ordinance was drafted to comply or be consistent with the statute. And there is some reason for this, where if you look at the survey that was provided by the applicant, you can see that the applicant's lot is a larger lot. It's got a road frontage of 160 feet. And a garage is, detached garage is sort of toward the middle. And you can see the house to the left of the applicant's house or lot line is only got a 3-foot setback. So question with applicant's property with such a large property sometimes might be, well, why don't you consider moving the house a little more centrally into the lot to provide a greater setback, because you're only 12 feet from your neighbor's house, frankly. And I understand that the applicant's detached garage is on the site, which limits the ability to maneuver and relocate the home. And there's probably topographic and site conditions, rocks and things like that, that might make it more difficult. And I think you can see that from the picture that's actually included in the applicant's survey at the top left. So that's really what we would look for. For instance, if the house to the left, I don't know how large that lot is, frankly, but if something happened to that, you might want the house to have, and hopefully the owner would hope to have the house have a greater setback than 3 feet from a lot line. So there is a reason for it, but the applicant certainly can provide testimony. And the applicant's already said it's on the identical footprint, so there's no increase in nonconformity. And there may be site conditions and improvements that really would.
Bill, for guidance for us, what do you think of Mr. Kelly's position that they don't really need anything?
No, I think they do need something, but I think that they can make a case that they're entitled to that something. And they've already begun to make that case by saying, look, we're not expanding the footprint at all. We're going to build on the identical footprint. So any nonconformity that might affect a neighbor is not being exacerbated at all.
Okay. From the board, any questions, any comments from the board?
I have a question. If you look at the survey, the front corner of the house is 8 inches off the county right away. Am I correct there? I mean,
8 feet.
Right? So I'm looking at the picture. Now that car parked in front of the house, that's at least 8 foot. That stone wall was constructed on the county right away. I mean,
yeah, and it's shown in the survey as being constructed in the county road.
but that was not there before the construction started. So does that need county approval?
Yeah, it does.
But that's up to the county. Listen, this application, if I'm hearing it right, is to build the same thing in the same place
Mhm.
as it was before. And I'm reading the ordinance as we go along too. So first of all, where did the 51% come from that we talked about? And secondly, no matter what the site plan is, if our ordinance says they can do that, what are we doing? I mean, it seems to me like they're not expanding anything, and whatever they're pre-existing, I know we can ask them to do a different thing, but if they're going to the letter of the law, as I see it, they're complying with our ordinance. Am I wrong, Bill?
Well, there's more than, that's a question. Is there more than partial destruction? I think that there is. I think that that's why they're here.
What's
And
a
then the
partial,
question-
what's a partial destruction? I don't see that. I don't see that measured. I'm struggling with that a little bit because partial means not everything.
We all are. We all are struggling
So
because,
You're muted. You're muted.
yeah, we're all struggling with that. What is partial?
Well,
And there's.
well, our ordinance is clear. I mean, I read it another 4 times, and quite frankly, I'd be hard pressed to do anything other than maintain what's already there, because we've already permitted that at one time or other. And so if they were changing anything, then it's a whole new ballgame. I just don't think that anything other on this site, other than the building that we're talking about, is on this application. And we just need to figure out, if we want to add a definition to partial, then we need to do that at a later date, but not now because we don't have one. I'm just,
It's tough
You know,
because
I'd like to
there's-
put in 2 cents here. Mike, I agree with you. I'm not even sure why this is in front of us.
Mr.
In our
Chairman.
ordinance, there is no percentage. There is nothing regarding how much destruction. These people are just putting back what was already there. And to me, it seems like we're putting them through the ringer. This is,
Can I make a comment?
yeah.
Go ahead.
The building that was up there before was an absolute disaster, was the ugliest thing for a couple of years. They've already done construction on this property. And let me tell you, the building they're building up there, right on the same footprint, is a really nice looking building and it's very conservative, fits right in with the community. They cleaned that lot out. They cleaned out all the trees in the backyard. They've done a phenomenal job, but the building's almost done. I mean, the main building and then the portion that comes out to the street, that concrete slab's been poured and it's already got a building and framed already on it. It's not looking for construction. The building's done. And I mean, the owners can comment on that, but I mean, I drive by it every day. And I am so glad to see that somebody finally took initiative and cleaned that place up and put in a nice piece of property.
and they went out and got permits to do it.
Pardon me?
And they went out and got permits to do it.
Yes, they did.
So
So
I
it's
don't
not
think,
it's not like they snuck anything in there. So that's not the case at all. The
they
case
really
here
did a
is,
beautiful job on that piece of property.
well, the
I mean,
case here is what's partial, and should we do that here, or can we do that here? Again, I'm also looking at Cox and I can't find it. So
No, it does not define
Your house.
partial, because the statute doesn't define partial. It's not clear that a municipality, what the municipality's role might be in providing a greater definition than the statute already has. So I recognize the board's position and concern, and I sympathize with the applicant and there's probably some reason why they said, well, let's just build on the same foundation rather than, anything else. I'm sure there's some justification for that.
It's a conforming. They could have done a lot different, but they didn't want to.
well, they did not expand anything. The key
No.
here is that they were aware not to expand anything, and they haven't. They've improved it, which is really a positive criteria.
Absolutely.
Positive for the town, right?
Right.
So
I
the
mean,
question,
so
the question
the-
remains, should they even be here? Or should they
No,
simply
they
continue with the work?
Well,
No, they should not be here. It's a waste of our time, frankly.
and their time.
Mr.
I have
Schindler,
one quick thing. I don't have a problem with
Depends on
constructing the
the
house or the location of the house. I have a problem with constructing that boulder wall in the county right away. How can we let that, I mean, that's,
well, that's another jurisdiction. That's another.
yeah, but isn't that,
jurisdiction.
John? I mean, isn't that falling to you?
Yeah, the question does become, should have that, if they're doing any substantial grading on site, you know, should they have submitted a lot grading plan? And that, I haven't, seen the property lately. So if they may be in violation of, and Bill can look at that and see if in fact there was any violations, but you're not supposed to regrade your property unless you have a grading plan. So that's something that we can look at.
What they house right down to the foundation, then it is certainly appropriate for the board to take a look at it, because you might, and again, I go back to the house to the left of this, it's 3 feet off the lot line. And if that's a larger lot, maybe that's not the best thing to rebuild a house with a 3-foot setback on that foundation. There are times when the board should take a look at these things. We've had applications with setbacks less than 3 feet. And that's a pretty bad planning, frankly, to have a setback like that.
Not a 3-story house going back there where it's overshadowing the other one. It's a small structure. We haven't seen a house this small in a couple of years.
Right.
And that's a justification, is that it's a 1-story home, and that's a justification for the approval of this board.
I think it is common practice for applications like this to come to the board when there's, this much renovation, that they're bringing it basically down to the foundation and rebuilding. And that is common to bring it back to the board. And although it is very minor, typically when you have a condition where you're expanding the mass, like for example, and it's not substantial, and I have no objection to it, but the roof itself is being changed where there's more mass within that front yard setback. So, it is a relatively simple application. We probably spent more time on it than we need to, but it's probably in the applicant's best interest just to move forward, get these approvals, and so that he has a record of it anyway when he goes to sell the property, or just, it's always good to have these pre-existing non-conforming variances, memorialized in a resolution when they, go to sell or whatever the case may be. So the fact that they went through all these motions, I think the board should just, go forward, grant the application, and let's move on.
I agree.
I agree.
And Bobby, to your point, that's a county issue. If they put something in the right of way of the county engineer will get involved in that and deal with that, or they'll plow it up in the winter. So that's their issue.
But Bill, we should look at it and make sure that there's, because sometimes these renovations do turn into a little bit more site work than was initially anticipated. And sometimes there are, issues that expand and they need a lot grading permit. So that's something that Bill can look into and see if that's an enforcement action. It's not necessarily any action the board needs to take action on for an enforcement. It's something that Bill will do internally.
Right.
And we'll take a look at it. Duly noted.
That's not, it's not on this, it's not us to deal with.
It is if they disturb, unless they're looking for a lot grading waiver, which Bill O'Connor can grant that, but that just needs to be looked at. If they're doing any substantial grading on site, they may require a lot grading permit, and we can evaluate separately from the application.
That wall that they built, actually, they moved that wall back from where the original wall was. Before, that original wall was further out into the street, into the main. They moved that thing back at least 4 or 5 feet when they put those new boulders in.
I don't ever remember a wall being there, to be honest with you.
They were there before.
I don't remember seeing that. And I drive up that road every day.
I've been driving by there for years, and I actually talked to Bill Dunnigan about it many times. And Bill said one of the things they would need to do is move that wall, and they did, and they moved that wall back. I mean, we can ask the owner how far back they moved the wall. He's on the. He's here.
I think we're getting a little off track with the wall. Okay, the wall's a county issue. Let's bring it back and let's just deal with.
This issue has to do with partial.
Exactly.
And whatever that is. And that's what we need to focus on. And if we want to relook at that ordinance, we can. But I'll tell you what, I can't see any reason on God's green earth why they should be here.
All right, let's open it to the public. Would anybody from the public like to comment or question this application? Anybody at all from the public? If you would, please go to the bottom of your screen. In reactions, raise your hand. I will wait a moment while Mr. Tappan and I look for any raised hands. Ron, do you see any?
Yeah.
I don't see any. Okay, I will bring it back to the board. What is the pleasure of the board?
Approve, O'Reilly.
Yeah.
I'll move it to approve it. Or second it then.
Mr. Bongiovanni,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Mrs. Crock,
Yes.
Mr. Ray,
Yes.
Mr. Riley,
Yes.
Mr. Tappan,
Yes.
Councilman Schindler,
Yes.
Mayor Francis,
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert.
Yes.
Since
Okay,
they've
is there
already
anything
started
else, Mr.
construction.
Kelly?
Mr. Kelly,
Yes,
you're going to ask the board, I'm sure, for a waiver of
Effective.
memorialization, right?
yes, I have no further arguments to make. I just want to thank the board members for their, for looking into this and understanding what we were dealing with. It's much appreciated. The application, of course, would be to waive the resolution.
I'll make
Okay,
that
is there
motion.
somebody who wants to make a motion to approve waiver of
So
memorialization?
moved. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Mr. Bongiovanni,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Mrs. Crock,
Yes.
Mr. Ray,
Yes.
Mr. Riley,
Yes.
Mr. Tappan,
Tappan?
Ron.
Ron?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Councilman Schindler,
Yes.
Mayor Francis,
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert.
Yes. Okay.
Mr. Kelly, if
Mr.
you're still
Kelly,
there,
Ms. Borg and Mr. Masser, thank you very much for coming tonight and for providing us with this information. Bill, do you have something else to say?
I just want Mr. Kelly to call me tomorrow about something other than this.
I will absolutely do that unless you want to talk now.
No, I don't
I'm
think
just kidding. Come on, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. And it's good to present a case while there's a Giants game on.
Yeah.
And we'll end on that one tonight.
Okay.
Thank you all very much.
Go watch.
We couldn't bear to hear two lawyers talking.
Thanks for all your help.
Thank you. Okay. Is there a zoning officer's report?
Nothing this evening.
Okay, thank you very much, Bill. Discussion. Is there anything we need to discuss?
I had a conversation with Mr. Tappan at the Borough Hall the other day. Ron, you want to comment on what you and I talked about?
Sure. I was going to do that under old business. I talked about the badges the last time. Let's just put this to rest and clarity on this. The badges are a good thing to wear when you're going out to look at a property that we got to vote on and we got to get a vision of what we're going to do, and you're representing the borough and people know that you're there and you have that badge that authenticates that you are a representative of the borough. And I made the comment that after the resolution, everything's done and construction's done, the badge don't get you back on that property. And that's true. You can't go back on the property, but it doesn't mean, absolutely doesn't mean that you can't come into the construction office, talk to Bill and say, hey, Bill, in that resolution, we told them to do A, B, C, and D on that property. Are they doing that? And please verify that they are so we know that they're meeting that resolution. You always have the right to do that. So I want to clarify that. It doesn't strip your rights of looking at what's been approved. God knows we go through everything to get things approved and get resolutions going and get permits going. And we want to make sure they're doing what we have approved. It just doesn't allow you to go back on the property. You can't do that. That's just not, we don't have the right to do that as a board, but you have the absolute right to see the UCC officer and see they're doing exactly what we approved. So that's what I want to reiterate.
Thanks.
Bill, Coach, did I cover it?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Is there anything else we need to discuss at this point?
Yes, I would like to bring up the fact of this non-conforming use and the percentage from our ordinance. Where did that come from? And why were decisions made? Who made decisions to red flag these guys where there wasn't true fact in the sense of what percentage? I mean, their foundation was still there. Does that account for any percentage? I mean, I'm a little confused and
I'll take the hit on that. I'll take the hit on that. Bill Dunnigan and I spoke about that. And where it's just a foundation, I absolutely, and the board can disagree with me, that's fine. That's part of life. But where there's just a foundation, I think the applicant should, the property owner should come back in and present to the board that the place should be rebuilt on that location. I do. The board, you know, can disagree, and that's fine. Unfortunately, there is no definition in the statute. As I said, we had an ordinance and interpretation that if you could see any indicia whatsoever of where a foundation was, that you could rebuild there. That's not the law. That's just not the law. And I go back, and maybe, you know, I was in the bad seat, but I had one with 4 walls of the house and a fire inside. And the board said in Sussex County, you've got to come in and prove your case. I had 4 walls and a partial roof. Not that that means it's right. And it is the same ordinance in that other town that I went through, not just the foundation, but the structure. So this is the way other municipalities treat it. I think it's appropriate. If Hopatcong wants to take a looser stand, that's okay, I suppose. But the municipal land is the municipal land use law.
So, Bill, let me ask you a question for clarity moving forward, because we might need to change something. I don't know. The question is with these people, this property, they actually went and pulled permits. Okay. Yeah. Obviously, they went in and got permits to do work. So it wasn't like they were just doing something willy-nilly. They got approval. And when you're in the middle of a job doing something and you have to take down everything, but you already have your permits, it really seems funky that all of a sudden we say, hey, wait a minute, stop.
Rich, I guess,
you can stop.
Rich, I guess the clarification is, Bill, did they have permits for redoing the foundation and such? I thought they.
No. Yeah, see, the scenario is, I mean, going back to the wall we were talking about, I wasn't going to bring this up during the process because, you know, I knew the delicate nature of the situation. But going back to the original property, they started working on the wall, and of course it was Mr. Riley that brought it to my attention and sent them a notice and told them they needed to come in and do a zoning for that. They didn't come in to do zoning on that for over a year. They came in on their time, not our time. As a matter of fact, I ultimately had to issue a summons on that to actually get them in. Then ultimately they did. They absolutely did come in and get the permits to rebuild the house. And this is all brand new ground, because if everyone remembers, our ordinance for probably 10 years or close to that indicated that any part of the original structure remaining constituted partial destruction. And Mr. Haggerty was wrestling with that on and off through the years, and he'd make comments that, you know, that really isn't appropriate. We should really be in step with the land use law. And ultimately, we changed that about 2 years ago, and we went to the present ordinance that we have. It does not define partial, and I think I'm gleaning from Mr. Haggerty, it intentionally doesn't support partial because the way the law is written. They did come in with a set of plans. I went to Cox, and Cox does indicate, it indicates that the convention in a lot of towns in the state, it indicates that a rule of thumb is that the foundation and at least 2 walls remain. So that's Cox's view of what the rule of thumb is across the state. And effectively, I mean, I don't see where, if anything less than that, my making a decision, I mean, I liked it the way it was, but the difficulty is the people who are right next to this house, the fact that this house is so close to the property line, they could take issue that we approved it. And it's a very, it's a very, very difficult position to be in for me because say it's the original foundation and we're simply just going to take the wood down because it's all rotted out and we're just going to, come back with the new frame. That does seem like common sense. But again, Mr. Haggerty is, he's looking out for us to try to prevent lawsuits. And he's telling us we shouldn't do that. So, but these people definitely deviated. Let me get back to that part of the story. Their architect certified, and he certified on the plan with his seal that they would maintain the 51% of the building. And then as the building was being constructed, Mr. O'Connor came to me and said that they removed, number one, first they removed the foundation in the rear. And they needed to do that because the grading was all messed up, and if they didn't, they were going to continue to have, water damage to the lower part of that rear wall. So, but they redid that, and then they reframed that back wall. And then ultimately, they ended up taking down the whole front part of L or foot of the L of the house. They took that out, and they put a whole brand new foundation in that. So they got to the point where they no longer had those two walls and the foundation, and I didn't think I had any choice but to ask them to stop work. And I was encouraging them to come into the board, and as Danielle had mentioned a little earlier, they were having trouble getting them so that it could be considered a complete application. We were wrestling with getting them to do the right paperwork.
Well, if we'd known this before, we might have looked at this application differently.
But at the end of the day, I'm reading our ordinance again on restoration. They complied with our ordinance. You can make up all the numbers you want. You can talk about rule of thumb. You can talk about other towns. Our ordinance is clear.
It says partial, Michael.
Pardon me?
It says partial.
It says partial. Correct. Okay. And what percentage is partial? That's an arbitrary number that you're picking, Bill. Both Bills. And I'm picking.
I'm going by case law. Ordinances, there's case law that certainly if somebody's down to two walls of a foundation and push came to shove, if this was litigated, who's going to lose? It's going to be us. That's it. Just be mindful of these.
It's certainly something that the borough should look at and define that, so there is no, so it's clear in the ordinance. It protects the people's rights who own the property and the adjoining property owners who, can defend what the borough approves. So it is something that the ordinance, we should look at the ordinance.
Listen, they stayed within the property footprint, just like it said they should.
Yeah, but Bill, Donegan, didn't we just have a similar application over in a couple of years ago on Lakeside Boulevard, a similar situation where they took down?
Yeah, the house burnt down. Yeah, the house burnt down right around.
Yeah, so this is not but they did come to the board when the house burnt down. So
that's because they made changes. They made changes to the footprint, to the actual house.
Did they? I thought they worked off the existing
foundation. No, it was not the same.
They made it a little big. They did make it a little bigger. Mm-hmm.
Yep. The one out on Pickle Point?
No. Right by me, Bill. Just up the road from me, the one that burnt down. It was real close to the other adjoining property.
Oh, the two-family, or actually four-family. That one?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yeah. But well, that was, that got caught up into this mess too, because what occurred is originally Mr. Shelton had come in and he'd gotten it right after the fire, and our ordinance at the time was anything less than 100% loss would be considered partial destruction, and I approved the zoning permit to rebuild same size, same location. And then, of course, he never did. He did not rebuild that house. And then we changed the ordinance. And then a new owner came in to get the zoning permit. And that's how that one unfolded. And ultimately, when it came time to, to actually get the building permits and the new zoning permit for what he was doing, we reached the point where we said, that old zoning permit wasn't in effect any longer because the ordinance had changed. And so that and he might have made some changes and expanded it, and it made me feel a little bit easier on making that decision.
What do we have, Lord? There was non-conforming property that was destroyed or whatever and had a partial, or let's say just down to the foundation, but it was non-conforming. Wouldn't we want to take a look and just ask the opportunity to get it in conformance? Just to come to the board and seek that ability to make it conforming, if it's a possibility?
Well, I kind of agree with you, Ron, is that the board should be looking, it's not necessarily the board's function just to, I hate to say it, just be easy on the residents. It really should be looking at it as a land use perspective, and does it make sense to pull things and make it into conformance? And if you feel that, bringing it into conformance is too strict, then we need to look at our setbacks and say, hey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. It does make sense if you have a building that's taken down to the foundation. It doesn't take a lot of effort to move that foundation and getting it into compliance.
And if they had come to the board for a work session to figure out, say, hey, we've got this big piece of property, we've got this, what would we do? We would have recommended them to move it probably 10 feet more over to the one side and then be totally conformed. And then they literally took the foundation almost on that whole building down, the back wall and the whole front's a whole brand new foundation.
At the end of the day, though, the end result is the same. We approved it to go ahead. The home was still existing. It was still up. All four walls were there. It hadn't burned down, hadn't fallen down. They were just rehabilitating it. They probably shouldn't have torn it all down the way that they did. But at the end, we have a structure that's been put up the same size, same place, and it's better off, right? You talked about some of the foundation issues.
I have no objection to going through this the way we did.
Yeah.
We're guided by our ordinance. We all have an opinion. We're guided by our ordinance. Our ordinance is the law.
I think the end result was good for everybody.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Let's move on to resolutions. We have two resolutions tonight. Kevin and Jennifer Casper, hearing date October 5th, 2021. Motion is in order to approve the Casper resolution. Are there any additions or corrections to the resolution? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion, we approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
Mr. Bongiovanni,
Abstain.
Mr. Duncan,
Abstain.
Mrs. Crock,
Yes.
Mr. Ray,
Yes.
Mr. Riley,
Yes.
Mr. Toppin,
Yes.
Councilman Schindler,
Yes.
Mayor Francis,
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert.
Yes. And Daniel Gordon, October 5th, 2021. Are there any additions or corrections to that ordinance, to that resolution? Okay, then I will entertain a motion to approve that one as well.
I'll move it. Phil Riley.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Bongiovanni,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan,
Abstain.
Oh, Danielle, I'm sorry. I have to abstain.
I got you. Mrs. Crock,
Yes.
Mr. Ray,
Yes.
Mr. Riley,
Yes.
Mr. Toppin,
Yes.
Councilman Schindler,
Yes.
Mayor Francis,
Mike,
Mayor Francis,
Mayor Francis,
Michael.
I think he's locked up.
I think he's frozen.
Hey, Mike.
There he is.
Hi.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, he said
Gilbert.
yes.
Yes. Okay, correspondence. We have a letter from PAX Surveying and Environmental concerning 37 Madison Avenue dated October 18th, 2021. Has everybody seen this correspondence?
No.
Does
Madison
anybody-
Ave or Madison Trail?
Madison Trail.
We don't have a Madison Ave.
No.
Typo.
Anybody want to explain that?
We were on
Ron,
the
do you know what it's
200 foot
about?
list. We were on the 200 foot list, Alan. Half the borough got the letters.
Oh, is that all? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Escrow refunds for information purposes only. There have been 4 escrow refunds. Bills. Anybody want to pay the bills?
Pay the bills.
Pay the bills.
Mr. Bongiovanni,
Yes.
Mr. Gab, nope, sorry, Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Ms. Crock,
Yes.
Mr. Ray,
Yes.
Mr. Riley,
Yes.
Mr. Tappan,
Ron?
Yes.
Councilman Schindler.
Yes.
Yes.
Mayor Francis,
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert.
Yes. I will now open the meeting to the public. Would anybody from the public like to address the board on any issue at all? If so, please go to the bottom of your screen and in reactions, raise your hand. I will wait a moment as Mr. Tappan and I look over the screen and see if we see anybody's hand raised. I do not see anybody's hand raised. So I will bring it back to the board. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? Ms. Crock?
First of all, I would like to say it's lovely seeing all you people again. This is my first time to you all. And I miss meeting. Please adjourn. And happy to see you all.
We're gonna get you a new phone.
I think she said happy Halloween, or I think she said happy Halloween and go Giants or something.
Okay, somebody want to adjourn the meeting?
Meeting adjourned.
We are adjourned.